How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to our NSX-T series, where in this video we're going to be taking a look at the edge node and how that's going to be used as the default gateway for all of our overlay segments. Now, the overlay segments are going to be deployed, which are deployed currently. I've got two of them now. I have a Windows overlay and a Linux overlay, and I've got a couple of additional VMs deployed for Windows so that we can have some cross communication and things like that. So the overlay segment is deployed, and there's communication back and forth between all the ESXi hosts and all that good stuff. So what we need to do now, in order for us to leverage the gateway, in order for us to route in between our overlay segments, we must connect it to an overlay. We must connect the overlay to a gateway, and there's two different gateways that you can deploy. You can deploy a tier 0 gateway, or a tier 0 and a tier 1. You can't just do tier 1 by itself. You have to do tier 0 then tier 1. Now I'll talk a little bit more about how the hierarchy works and how this comes into play, but in the event that you have a scenario where you need east-west communication between different overlay segments, you can pretty easily deploy that and with an edge node, but not needing to do any communication from the edge node outbound. So you don't have to have routing in and out of your NSX-T environment. I do have a couple of customers that do leverage something similar to that. Now the edge node is an OVA appliance that we are going to deploy. There's two different ways that you can do it. You can deploy, we're doing the virtual machine version. There is a hardware edge node that you can do as well. But we're going to be deploying the first one from NSX Manager, where we're going to go through and configure all of the variables that we need to. And it is going to sit on ESXi 5. That is the direction I'm going to go with it. The other way to do that is to deploy the OVA of the edge node, edge appliance. So whenever you download NSX-T and you go to roll this out, you would deploy it on one of the options to do is to download the edge appliance along with the unified appliance, which is actually the NSX Manager. So you could deploy it both ways in a virtual context. Once you deploy your edge VMs and they are online and working, the next thing that you go do is you go through and configure the edge nodes into a cluster. And this is going to be where the high availability comes into play. You don't have to do two edge nodes. You can do as little as one, but you have to have an edge node cluster in order for that to work. So if you don't have an edge node cluster, it's not going to work. So you have to tie that. That's what's going to bring all the capabilities and services online for it. Once you do that, and everything is rolled out and everybody's happy, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here on how this is actually going to work. So I did deploy a VDS for the edge communication. And what that's basically going to allow us to do is you're going to have two interfaces for management, two for storage. We're taking the vMotion service and we're putting that on the management VM kernel adapter, and then the two trunk links here are going to be used for upward connectivity. So anything in and out of the NSX-T environment is going to come in on VMNIC 5 and 6, and then eventually I'm going to go ahead and just bring this in just for clarity's sake. All of the segments that we've deployed, all the overlay segments that we've deployed, we're going to connect their gateways, connect those segments to a gateway. We're going to start up with the tier 0 gateway first, and that's going to allow them to talk to the edge nodes. The edge nodes are going to be where the IP address actually sits. So, and they're going to use overlay segment communication in order to talk back and forth between the edge communication. So anything that's on the same box, right? If you've got, if you're on the same ESXi host in the same segment, you're going to talk. You're never going to leave the host. But if you need to talk from one host to the other, you're going to use the overlay segment to get there. And if you're in the same subnet, if you're in a different subnet, you have to travel to the edge node and then back via the tunnel to wherever you've got to go. So everything's going to be encapsulated inside of Geneva, depending on where you want to be. So we're going to go ahead and deploy the edge nodes, the first one, and get that deployed on host 5, and then we're going to deploy the edge appliance to host 6. That's going to allow us to get everything up and running and verify all the communications that we need to have in place in order for that to work. Once we have that in place, you and I will be in good shape to start doing inter-segment routing. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and move this. I do already have a couple of the VMs already mapped for IP addresses. So we're going to go ahead and knock that out, and I do have the overlay segments deployed as we need to. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way, and I'm going to go to System. Now this process does take some time, so if you're in a hurry, go get yourself a couple of cups of coffee, because this process will take some time. So I'm going to go over here to Edge Transport Nodes. I'm going to say Add Edge Transport Node. Now mind you, the hosts that we're installing these Edge Transport Nodes on do not have NSX-T VIBs installed on them. They are just regular hosts that are going to have a VM attached to them for communication. So I'm going to type in here, and I have to go and add a DNS entry here. This is why I haven't done all my DNS entries out of the gate. I'm going to go ahead and say new host. It's going to be DC1-edge node 1. And then the IP address from that guy, we're going to just grab an IP that isn't being used at the moment. So I'll say 31. Does that look like a winner? That does look like a winner. So 172.31.1.31. Click on add host. And then we're going to do DC1-edge node 2. Going to be 172.31.1.32. Just like that. Click on OK. Close that out. Minimize. So we're going to type in DC1-EN1. That'll be DC1-EN1.nsx.local. We're going to have to define the form factor. Now, the bigger the form factor, 8 CPUs, 32 gigs of RAM, 16, 64, so on and so forth, depending on the size of the form factor will determine its capabilities. So I'm going small for obvious reasons because I'm in a lab. We're going to give it a normal CPU reservation, and then we're going to say 50% of the RAM. So instead of giving it all 4 gigs, we're going to give it a minimum of 2. We're going to click on next. Now we have to specify all of the credentials. So we're going to use the same password we've been using up to this point. And get all of that done. There we go. And I'm going to allow SSH logins across the board. Click on next. The deployment, I'm going to put it on the Compute Manager DC1 VCSA and the Edge cluster. And there's going to be 2 clusters, or 2 hosts. I'm going to put it right there. And there's that. So the data store, we can go ahead. So this is where you could also come in and configure another data store if you wanted to. So I kicked the idea around of just putting it on whatever, but you'll notice that there's only 2 data store. There's technically data store 4. You're going to want to keep this on shared storage. Now, the interesting thing about this is you can do this one of 2 ways. You can keep it on shared storage, so maybe a dedicated storage array that is for just edges. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick it on SAN 1 because that's where all of our Linux VMs are sitting. And this will be a Linux box. So that's pretty much all you have to do there. Now, the way this is going to work is you're not going to want to have your edge node VMs moving back and forth between host 5 and host 6, right? So one of the things that I'm going to add in here once both VMs are deployed to both hosts is I'm going to go through and I'm going to create an affinity group. More specifically, an anti-affinity group that's going to say, I do not want Edge Node 1 and Edge Node 2 both residing on the same host at the same time. They will not be able to reside on the same box. The reason I'm going to do that is I would hate to have something happen to have them both co-located on the same host and that host crashes. Well, now I just lost all of my network connectivity into my virtual environment. Don't want that. So instead of doing that, I'm going to create an anti-affinity group that's going to say, they are not allowed to reside on the same host concurrently. So that's what I'll do. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way. I'm going to click on next. It's going to be a static IP. In this case here, it's going to be 172.31.1.31/24, and the gateway is going to be 172.31.1.254. I'm going to select the interface. I need to use the edge uplinks, which are going to be trunking all VLANs. And the search domain is going to be nsx.local. The DNS server is going to be 172.31.1.253. And that's pretty much all we need. Click on next. Now, here's another variable that we should talk about briefly. We have two transport zones currently. We have one for overlay and one for VLAN. Now, currently the VLAN one allows, go ahead and pull up my diagram again. Currently the VLAN segment allows blue connectivity. So the blue is still VDS port groups that are tied to this CSR 1000V. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if we look at the red line, which is going to be our NSX-T VLAN back segments, what's going to end up happening is if I was to add it to that VLAN transport zone, that means, if I do that, then I'm also allowing the edges to communicate with the rest of the VMs that are attached to this overlay, this transport zone. So when I said that a transport zone is a boundary area, not a security boundary, but a communication boundary. So what I don't want to have is a dedicated transport zone for VLAN that stretches everywhere, because essentially then I'm stretching communication everywhere, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go, while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new transport zone. I'm going to call this, the edge switch name is going to be edge-n-vds. The transport zone, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to call overlay, but I'm going to create a new transport zone. And this new transport zone is going to be called edge TZ, and it's going to be VLAN. Now, the reason why I need one for VLAN is because from the edge node logically northbound, so from, wrong diagram, from, actually this is a better right here, this is a better example. From the edge nodes themselves, northbound to the CSR 1000Vs, you'll notice that there's additional subnets right here, right? Well, these VLANs, these extra subinterfaces on the CSR 1000Vs, are going to be correlated to the communication for NSX-T. So now 170, if you recall, and I can't pull it up at the moment on NSX Manager, but you'll recall that this subnet right here is used as the overlay subnet range. So whenever a NSX-T device learns an overlay segment from NSX Manager, it's going to get a VTEP IP address in that 172.131.170 address range. Well, in order for this to work, and one of the things we have to do in this particular deployment model is the edge nodes need, for their communication from the edge node northbound and to be able to talk to the NSX-T installed ESXi host, they must be using a different VLAN. So there are some caveats for that, and I won't get into them now because they're difficult to explain. So what will end up happening is this blue line here that you can see, let me go ahead and zoom in on it right here. This blue line here, right, that's coming over the trunk link, and this darker green line here that's coming across the trunk link, and then they both, so the green line terminates on CSR2, the light blue line terminates on CSR1, and that's connection specific, because that's going to provide me uplink connectivity for static routing, for OSPF, or BGP, all of that type of stuff. That's going to be where these connections right here, the blue line, the baby blue line connecting to this edge node, and this darker green line connecting down to this edge node, they are also going to be VLAN backed segments. So we're going to have to create two more VLAN backed segments that are going to get mapped to the edge nodes, respectively, in the edge transport zone. So I only want edge transport zone to be able to talk to the outside world. I do not want to be able to allow a VM that's attached to a VLAN backed port group, an NSX-T VLAN backed segment, to be able to communicate with the edge node directly from the outside. I don't want that. So therefore I created an extra transport zone for external connectivity only that will facilitate that. And I'm going to show you exactly how that's going to get deployed right now. So I've got edge TZ, the uplink profile. I'm going to go ahead and use the edge single. I could use multiple VTEPs if I want to, because I actually do have do have that set up. Now I have the IP assignment is going to be TEP. So I need to come up with an IP pool. Now if I come down here, I don't actually have the TEP the pool here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another tab, and I'm going to go to pull up NSX Manager. I'm going to log into him, or he's already here. First thing I have to do is come over here to networking, and then IP address pools. I need to come in here and say new address pool, and this one's going to be not TN pool, it's going to say EN or edge node. Add address pool, EN dash pool, and I'm going to set the subnets. It's going to be a range of 172.31.10, or I'm sorry, this will be 171.11 through 172.31.171.30. Same range as the other guy. 172.31.171.0/24. The gateway is 172.31.171.253. DNS server is 172.31.1.253. Sorry, gateway is going to be 254. There's that. I'm going to go ahead and click on add. Minimize that, apply, and then save. Now, that's going to be initialized. I'm going to come back over here, hit this guy down, and we may have to go, the uplink here, we'll be able to say edge uplinks, save. This guy here, we'll be able to click save. So they're going to use both uplinks. So I may have to go back a screen for it to trigger that. Let's see if it'll see it now. Okay, that's not going to work, so it's not detecting it, and there's no way for me to refresh this. So I'm going to say use IP pool. I don't want it to use the transport node pool. Technically speaking, I can let this go. I can actually let this go through. I've done this in the past where I've had the transport node pool, and then I change it, and then it just reconfigures itself. I'm going to see if there's, I'm going to pause real quick, and we're actually done. This is the last step in the thing. So what I'll do is I'm going to pause, and then I will reconfigure, I'll redo everything that I just did, and then we'll change it, and this will be EN pool, because the EN pool is there now. It's a lot of steps just to go back through with you guys here in the video. So that's what I'll do. I'll just pause real quick, make that adjustment, because I wish there was a way to go in here and adjust this, but there's not. Can I do EN dash pool? Would that work? Oh, there it is. Haha. Oh, there. Okay. I don't know if that's gonna work, but I'm gonna go with it. Finish. Let's see if that actually works. I was just like, well, I wonder if I could just type it in. So right now we are in deployment mode. So it says deployment. Now if I go over here to ESXi or in vCenter, we're going to see that we see deploy OVF template compute dot or com dot, or this is NSX Manager. So what's going to end up happening is I'm going to go and close this window out. We're going to go ahead and it's going to deploy this guy from NSX Manager to here, and this is what we're going to be deploying. Now I can come up here and I can do a consistent ping to DC1 EN1, and it'll try to ping 172.31.1.31. It's going to take, I'm not going to do this right now because it's not going to work. So it's going to need quite a while to do that particular piece. Now there is another variation of this. So I debated doing two separate videos. I'm just going to go ahead and deploy both at the same time. It'll just take more compute power long term, but that's okay. So the other way of doing this is through the OVF deployment model. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and copy that to my local, my documents here, because it's not already here, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so I was able to get the Edge OVA copied over. So the way that we deploy this is actually kind of unique. So what we have to do is we have to log into one of these ESXi hosts and then deploy the OVA that way. So I'm going to go ahead over here and type in https // that's going to be dc1-esxi6.nsx.local. privacy here. We're going to go ahead and accept that. We're going to go to root and log in locally. So what I'll do is I'll click on OK. And then we're going to go to virtual machines, create register virtual machine, grab an OVA, click on next. I'm going to call this one here DC1-EN2. Select the file. I'm going to go to documents. I'm going to click on Edge, click on open, click next. We're going to put this on SAN 1. Click next. So we have some network mappings that we have to do. Now, what's interesting about this is we have some network mappings, but you notice that they're all the same, right? There's really nothing here that we can work with. So I will have to go and, which is actually kind of funny because if I look at 6 actually should have all of the correct network adapters. Virtual switches. Yeah, so he's got the, oh wait, no he doesn't. He doesn't have the, he should have the uplinks. Why does he not have the uplinks? That's interesting. Okay. This should be mapped to both hosts, right? Hosts? Yeah, it's mapped. That's weird. Okay. Let me go ahead and cancel that process real quick. We'll go to networking. Oh, the uplinks are there. I can change this after the fact. I believe I should be able to change this. VDS uplinks. Active ports. Virtual switches. Yeah, Edge VDS. And we have... Okay, that's just kind of weird. I'm not sure why that's showing up that way, but it is. Anywho, now once this is deployed, I can go, because that's almost done deploying. Once it's deployed, I can go ahead and modify the connectivity here. So not too terribly worried about that, but let's go ahead and let me go DC1-EN2, grab the edge, click on open, click next, SAN 1. Yeah, they're not letting me. So you would use VM Network for the first one, then 1 and 2 would be used for the edge connectivity uplink. Now the deployment type is going to be small, and you can't, oh there we go. So small means it's going to be 2 CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM, that's what we want. Thin provision, power on automatically, additional settings. All the things that we did in NSX Manager for this edge node, guess what we got to do right here? Got to set all those same variables right there. So the password, let's go ahead and run through this real quick. It only takes a couple seconds to plug in the passwords, unless you get some really ridiculously long passwords to deal with. Then it's can be kind of cumbersome. Okay. We're going to go with all of that. So then we have the manager IP. In this case here is going to be, so there's some additional steps that we're going to have to go through. So the manager IP in this case is 172.31.1.61. The username is going to be admin. The password is going to be capital P @ SSW0D1234. And repeat that. Because we have to register. The thumbprint, this right here, for the management plane. Because what we'll have to do is we'll actually have to register NSX Manager. So I've done this before. Sometimes it accepts all these variables. Sometimes you have to go in via the CLI. But in order to get the thumbprint, you have to log in via the CLI. And we're going to go ahead and open this guy up real quick. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way. That should open up another tab. So we're going to click on NSX Manager, load, and then open. Type in admin, and then the password. Give that a couple seconds to do its thing. I'm going to go ahead and blow this up just so that it's easier for you guys to see at home. So then we're going to come in, we're going to say get, and it's going to be controllers. No, it's get certificate. Certificates, cluster, thumbprint. Thumbprint. This is what we need right here. gets certificate cluster thumbprint. So we're going to click right there. We're going to paste that in. Node ID, I'm not going to specify that. I'm not going to mess with that. I'm not even sure what those are. Network properties. Host name is going to be DC1-EN2. Management IPv4 is going to be 172.31.1.32/24 mask. Gateway is 172.31.1.254. We're going to click on DNS. That's going to be 172.31.1.253. And it'll be NSX.local. Services configuration. Enable SSH, enable root logins, external. This stuff right here, I do not normally set HA section. We're not going to be doing any HA. I'm going to click on next and then finish. So now if we come down here at the bottom, failed. Access to resource settings on this host is restricted. Access to resources restricted to the server that's managing one. Yeah, okay, so. Oh, you know what? There's that way. I can also deploy it through vCenter. So I'll probably just do it through vCenter. So that's unfortunate. So we have that IP address. If we go over here and we hit the up arrow, it is responding. That'll take some time. It usually takes 2 or 3 reboots for it to happen. And then registration is pending, so that'll take some time to come online. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go back over here. I'm going to right click on this guy. I'm going to go ahead and deploy OVF template. We're going to say local file, choose files, grab the edge, click on open, and it's going to go pull it down. And now it's going to, I'm going to go ahead and name it. This one's going to be DC1-Edge Node 2. Click next. That host. And now it's actually going to pull the OVF file for whatever details we need to have. And then once that's done, that's going to populate right here. Now while that's doing that, I'm going to, I think I've got 2 open. Yep, I have to go to, I have to open up Secure CRT and make a couple of changes to the CSRs. So let me go ahead and pull up our topology for this, which should be right here. Yep, I'm going to pull up the topology. And I'm going to go ahead and say manager CSR1 and manager, there we go, right there. So I'm going to come over here, hit the enter key, show IP interface brief. I have to go create a couple of sub-interfaces. So interface gig2.170, encapsulation.1q170, IP address here will be 172.31.170.1/24. And then we're going to go ahead and we do not want to route this to the outside world. This will be communication with inside of the NSX-T fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and type in standby 170. IP is going to be 172.31.170.254. Just like that. And then I'm going to hit the up arrow a couple times and do 171. Encapsulation 171. And do the same thing here. And then standby 171. And do 171 there. Okay, so now if I basically just take this config into Notepad, let me go ahead and pull up Notepad real quick. Notepad. Let me pin that to my taskbar because I use Notepad a lot for doing various things. I'm going to go just grab all this config right here. And I'm going to paste it right here. And I'll go ahead and start pulling this config out just so that it's easier for you guys to see it in its full deployment model. And then we'll do the same thing here. Just like that. Okay, so now that we have that in place, I can just basically grab, this will be 172, and 2 right there. So we're just going to go grab this config, copy it. I'm going to say do right on this box, and then come over here to this guy. We'll paste this in here. Perfect. Do right. So now that that's out of the way, I'm going to go and minimize this. Okay, so now all the details are there. So if I come back over here to NSX Manager and we see node not ready, one NVDS, all that good stuff, I can click here and I go actions and I can change node settings. Those settings right here are going to be these connection details right here. I can't, if I want to edit it, I can edit it once it's fully deployed. Okay, so we're now at the point where we can start interacting, but I'm going to go over here back to NSX and we can see, okay, cool. Refresh it and everything's good to go. There's one alarm and it's most likely going to be CPU usage, which is what I expected. Okay, so we have our TEP IP addresses up, right? And so I just learned something. I've never done with that before, but by entering the name of the pool into the configuration, it made it update, and we can see that the TEP IPs are being associated correctly. So that's a good thing. So I'm going to go ahead and finish wrapping up the deployment of the other edge node, and then we'll go ahead and knock this out. So let's go back over here to this guy. We're going to click on next, and it's going to be the exact same flow, right? It's just we're doing it through an OVF deployment. Click on next. We're going to say SAN1. This is going to be a thin provision. We're going to go ahead next, networks. This is what I was looking for. I want network 0 is going to be management. So technically speaking, let me pause real quick. So network 0 through network 3. So for redundancy, we'll do 2 network for management, and then we'll, management, and then we'll do 2 with uplinks. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because we're going to have network redundancy across the board. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next. So that means that the first 2 adapters are going to be for management, and then the second 2 adapters are going to be for use for connectivity for providing overlay segment default gateway and providing us access outbound to the rest of the network. So here's where we set the passwords. Let's close that out. We have a bunch of password configurations to set in. Missed that one. And one more right here. There we go. Okay, so now it's going to be, we're going to just, so the defaults, the manager IP is going to be 172.31.1.61. Username is going to be admin. The password, hope I screwed that up. There we go. And the thumbprint, again, is going to be going back on, oh, it closed out. Let me go log back into that manager real quick. Maybe I should have pulled up Notepad. We'll pin this to the taskbar. We'll go type in get certificate cluster thumbprint. Grab that, put that here, just like that. Paste that right there. We're going to say the network host name is going to be DC1-EN2. IPv4 address 172.31.1.32 / 24mask 172.31.1.254. DNS server list 172.31.1.253, and then NSX.local. No, don't worry about NTP. Allow, enable SSH, allow root logins. Not doing any logging servers, even though we could point this to vSphere-Realize login site, but vRealize login site. I'm gonna leave all this other stuff blank and click on next and then finish. Unable to deploy template. Why am I unable to deploy the template? Let's see your summary. Got plenty of resources. Why is that giving us a hard time? Okay, I'm going to pause and figure that part out. I'm not sure why that's giving me a hard time. What I will do is I have to create an edge cluster to join this edge node to a cluster, and until you do that, you won't be able to do anything with the edge node. So I'm going to go to edge cluster, add edge cluster. I'm going to call this DC1-EC1, and then I'm going to bump this over here to the edge cluster, click on add, and now it's been added. Go back to edge transport nodes. It's been added here, so we're in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll pause and I'll figure out why the edge node 2 is giving me a hard time. I technically could deploy it from here again, but I wanted to deploy at least one through. I mean, you've seen the process, right? But I wanted you guys to see the additional step where the manager, or the edge node itself comes online, but it doesn't have a pointer. It needs to join the manager. Because right here, this one here automatically does it, where the other one does not. So we'll take a look at that in more detail. So I'm going to pause while that happens, and then I'll bring you guys back in. Okay, so I can see DC1 edge node 2 showing up, but for whatever reason, the percentage is not moving forward at the moment. Oh, there it goes. It's just taking a super long time to do it. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna pause. This is probably gonna take some time. Hopefully it doesn't fail, but I'm not sure why it's going so slow. But I'm gonna pause until this is done, and then I will show you guys how to. Okay, now it's going. Now it's moving. Usually it jumps right to 50%, if I remember correctly, and then it slowly climbs up. But at least it's moving now. So I'm gonna pause until we can interact with it. Alright, so our VM is fully deployed, but you notice it didn't power on because it's not managed through the NSX manager right now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click power on and let this guy do its thing. This will take some time, but I'm going to go hit the up arrow and Control C this. And we'll have to go in and do some configuration changes to this so that we can point it to the manager and have it join NSX manager. So, because when we do this, it won't automatically do that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and open the web console. I'm going to watch this guy boot up. So if we come over here to NSX manager and we log back in, give that a second to do its thing. There we go. So we're going to go over here to System, and then Fabric, then Nodes, then Edge Transport Nodes. So you can see it's not here. Now we can add an edge node, but what will end up happening is when we go to this edge node and it comes online and becomes fully operational, then we go to this guy and we point it to NSX Manager, and then eventually it just shows up. That's how that will work. So I'm going to go ahead and pause again while that comes online because it takes a few minutes for it to do its thing. But once it does, we'll be ready to go ahead and add it to NSX Manager. Okay, so the virtual machine has rebooted a number of times at this point, and we can actively ping it. Let's see. Well, it was pinging. There it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. It doesn't seem to be rebooting anymore. I usually give it time to do. It's like 2 or 3 reboots. We can see VMware Tools is installed. It's got an IP address. The network maps are done. All that good stuff. So what I'm going to go do is, if you go to Google and you type in NSX-T Edge Join Management Plane, and this first option here, if you click on it, the flow through the process is actually pretty simple. You need to get the API thumbprint. I've always done the get cluster certificate or certificate cluster thumbprint. So technically speaking, in my case, I want the manager appliance, not the cluster thumbprint, because of the fact that I'm not joining to a cluster. I'm joining to a single device. But I've got the manager print. So what we can do is we can open up the NSX Manager again, and I will go ahead and let's change the settings here so you guys can see what I'm doing. I can log in here, and we can run the command both times just to see if there's any variance in the thumbprint. I don't believe there will be, but if there is, I'll use the API thumbprint since I've only got a single manager deployed. So I'll type in get what was the command? Get certificate API thumbprint. API thumbprint. Oh, it is different, drastically different. So I'm gonna get this one here. I'll go ahead and I'll say this one here is cluster, and I'll say this one here is API. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this guy right here, grab all of that. I'm gonna come back over here to my Edge node, and the command that I want to throw in here, let me go ahead and bring this down just a touch so you guys can see all of it, is I want to use basically this apply. I want to use this command right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, paste it in here. So it's join management plane. The manager IP, in this case here, is going to be this IP. It's going to be 172.31.1.61. Thumbprint, manager thumbprint. And it's going to be this variable right here. Grab that, copy. Thumbprint is that username admin. Okay, so I'm going to go to the end, copy all that, go over here. I'm going to log in, admin, and the password. And then after a couple seconds, it should come online. And if we come back over here, I just want to verify that it's not showing up here. So once it comes online, the idea is to paste. I'm not sure if it's going to allow me to paste it in. Okay, I'm going to have to SSH it. That's fine. So let's go ahead and telnet session. We're going to go to DC1-EN1. We'll save that one just so that it's in here. Save. And then 2 and 2. We'll save. We'll open. Accept. Let me go ahead and make this bigger again so you guys can see it. I'm going to see if I can change the default settings to be something bigger. Click OK. Apply. Admin and the password. Okay. So now go back to here. Copy all this. Come back to this, click here, right click, and then I'm going to hit the enter key. And so we're going to go ahead and type in the password we've been using. I believe that's all we need to do. And it takes some time, but once you do it, it should start showing up here. I just don't remember how long it takes. So I think this has got to finish first. Once this finishes right here, once joining the management plane, once this is finished, it should start showing up right here. So this will take a couple minutes. I'm going to pause until I get a response. Okay, so I've seen this before where the node successfully registered as Fabric node this value, but it says timeout occurred while waiting for Edge services to connect with manager. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And there it is. Okay, so this is an expected output. Now, what's going to end up happening here is we get to a configure NSX. So there's no NVDS, there's nothing like this. If we were in a migration standpoint, this is what you would want, because you'd want to be able to, the migration coordinator that comes into play when you go from like V to T, there's specific steps that you would have to go through in order to make this work. So we'd have to configure NSX in order to make that happen. So what I'm going to go do is I'm actually going to go ahead and configure NSX to give it the variables that we need so that we can go finish this configuration. So I'm going to do is I'm going to click on NSX, and then the transport zones are going to be, let's go ahead and say edge-n-vds. Transport zone is going to be edge TZ and overlay TZ. Uplink profile will be multiple VTEPs uplink. The assignment will be IP pool from the edge node, and then we're going to select the VMNIX. Okay, so this is where I got to go jump over here to this guy and see exactly what edit set actions, edit settings. So we should have adapter 2, adapter 3, which in this case here is going to be, there we go. Okay, so this is fast path ETH0, ETH1, and ETH2. Fast path, this is data plane. Let me verify the network interfaces before I go selecting anything, because on the edge node itself, we're going to have to get forwarding. Sorry, get logical. What is that command? What am I after here? I want. There's get controllers. It should see a controller, so we should be able to verify that, and it does. It's good. It's up and running. But what I do need to do is get logical routers. So there's no VRF assigned yet, and that makes sense. I need to do, is it interfaces? Yeah, get interfaces. Get interfaces, and I need to verify the MAC addresses, because I don't want to accidentally map the wrong one. So if I scroll up here, so it's pulling it correctly, right? We see A1, that makes sense. A2, let me go back over here to this guy, and okay, here we go. So we have management. That's Charlie Foxtrot. 73, maybe not. EA. A1. Okay, here's A1. So A1. So okay, fat EA 73. So 73 is, I believe, was this one right here. This was EA 73. So that's network adapter 2. So I want to do this is going to be EA and A1. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come back over here to NSX, and we're going to be, we're going to say EA and then A1. Now, technically speaking, FastPath, so I made a small error in my mappings. So what I did here on this guy was I gave network adapter 2 management, when reality it should be actually uplinks. So I'm going to go ahead and make an adjustment there. So this should be uplinks. Click OK, and then that will change it, because this is management. If we go back over here to this and we go all the way to the top, ETH0, yeah. So go back over here to this guy. This would be Charlie Foxtrot. That's the management interface. this guy here, 73, is the one we want to do. This is the first. This would be fast path. The other one is 73, which is fast path Ethernet 0. So technically there'd be 3 network uplink, 3 interfaces on the edge node attached to uplinks on the VDS port group going to the outside. I'm using fast path. So realistically speaking, the way my brain works is I would do. I would come in here and I would uncheck this one. I'd use something else. So you don't have to map anything to this guy. So I'm actually going to click disconnect. Click OK. And then I will have to go. That's going to reconfigure the virtual machine. I'm going to come back over here to this guy. And I'm going to select. Because now it's updated to where it'd be actions, edit settings, and it's fast path 0 and fast path ETH 1 here. So I'm going to make an adjustment. Fast path ETH 0 and fast path ETH 1. Just like that. That's going to be the upstream connectivity. I'm going to go ahead and click on save. Now it's going to push that config. It's going to push that config to the upstream switches, or it's going to push that config to the edge node, and then now that that's done, notice how I have IP addresses now. So now that I have IP addresses, that's a good sign. So now the next thing I need to go do is I need to go click on edit. I'm sorry, not edit. Actions, and say add to edge cluster. I'm going to select the edge cluster from the drop down, DC1, EC1, click on add. Now that that's there, give it a couple of seconds and we're going to have tunnels between the edge nodes. Might take it a couple minutes for it to do that. But once it does, it's probably got high CPU at the moment. Yeah, so if we go back over here to this guy and we look at how this is connected, we can see now that if we hit the up arrow interfaces, we'll see that fast path ETH2 is down, but fast path ETH1 is up, and so is ETH0, and then we have management. Perfect. So it's working the way we'd expect it to. So let me go ahead and refresh, and now the tunnels are up. And the tunnels themselves are pointed to the other edge node. And we'll see that here in a second when we go to show this connectivity. We should see that it is remote IP. It's connecting to, that did not render well. But it's up. That's not rendering well. That should be, can I scoot that over? That's weird. Anyway, the connection's up, which is what we want to have. So now from here, now that we have our edge nodes deployed both through vManager or NSX Manager and through the OVA, and then manually adding it to NSX Manager, now we're at a point in the next video where we're going to be able to go through and get everything else rolling. So I want to thank you guys for stopping by and hanging out with me. I'll catch all of you in the following video. Take it easy, guys.